somebody asked me, Adela, I think it was, asked me, because we had this, as I said, it was very, very significant meeting with Harry. We all felt it was very significant. For us all, very life-changing and very, very strong, very powerful, very positive. And so Adela asked me recently, it's been 16 years, but she asked me, did I happen to know anything about how Harry and Una met? And so I said, yeah, I have something of an idea of how they met. And he'd been knocking around with friends for quite some time. Suddenly he finds himself alone in the city, and it's kind of a bummer, you know. So he goes to Rumpelmeyer's. And there's these two girls in this is how he described it, very starched uniforms, very, very starched uniforms. And they're heading toward him. One of them is named Una, and the other one is her exchange student roommate, and God, I'm sorry, I can't remember. I think it was Grain or something like that. Oh, forgive me if I'm wrong. Anyway, he said to her, this is we were talking about this in kind of we were sitting out in the garden out here. I have a little Zen garden. We were sitting in the Zen garden. He says, he says, I love Una so much. He says, I've grown to love her more and more over the 20 years. She's just wonderful. I adore her. And he said, first time I met her, I told her this. And this is at this meeting. Okay, she walks up to the table, and he says to her, you have the clearest eyes I have ever seen. And I am probably the most eligible bachelor you will ever see. Oh, no, I've ever seen in my life. You have the clearest eyes I've ever seen in my life. I am probably the most eligible bachelor you will ever meet in your life. And he asked her to marry him. That's what happened. He said, what do you like? He said, what can I do to prove myself? What can I do to demonstrate? She says, well, I like flowers. And the woman whose name I think was Lane, I'm not sure. So she says, well, I like melons. So he leaves. He hires a limo, which is fairly easy to do in the city. And he goes over to Smiler's Deli, which is an easy run for the melons. Melons were no-brainer. Just Smiler's Deli, pick up some melons, no problem. But where in the hell do you get flowers near dawn? You're like middle of the night, like 2, 3 o'clock, whatever. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, where do you bloody get flowers, right? So he asked the limo driver. Limo driver says, "What about the docks?" So they drive down to the docks where they sell flowers wholesale, right? So this limo driver down there, there's a funeral, there's a hearse, funeral thing, and they're loading it up, and so they're loading it up with this funeral flowers, and so he won't sell to Harry, so Harry waves a $100 bill at him, kind of points at the limo and smiles at him, and just charmingly, and the guy says, yeah, okay, fine. So they load up the limo, his limo, with the flowers. That gives him a $100 bill, and he drives back to the artist entrance over at Rumpy's, at Rumpelmeyer's. At this time, that is 1973, okay, and this was August 10th, 1973, if my mind serves me right. August 10th, 1973. Anyway, so at that time, outside Rumpy's, there was going to be a new, I got too loud there. I got excited. There was going to be a new subway there, and so they had the sidewalk was all covered up with wood, the plywood, see, which Harry said was held in place, was mortared in place with chewing gum, Essentially, that is New York. You know, the kids will say, if there's a crack to put chewing gum in, it'll do it, you know. Yeah, so that was so, you know, wild. Anyway, so he called the girls out to the limo, and they saw these, and they just flipped out. Because here's these melons, here's these flowers, middle of the night, you know, and this guy in a limo has brought these things and so on. So anyway, they went down to, right from them, for some reason, I think at that time, they went down to Washington because Senator Weicker had arranged for Harry to attend the Watergate hearings. Yeah, the Watergate hearings. So, you know, they got to the hotel, and they were there for 2 days. This was their first time together. That was their first night together. It was in Washington. They spent the night together at the hotel. That was their first time. It was a very romantic night. He said it was very romantic and very beautiful, and they looked out over Washington, and they embraced, and they kissed, and then eventually made love, and she disclosed that she was had not yet been deflowered, etc., etc. It was a very, very romantic thing. Anyway, what happened from that is, where I'm going with this, is that they met up with Eric Preminger Jr., Eric Preminger's son. Eric Preminger, who's Otto Preminger's son. And they drove, the whole bunch of them drove through Virginia until they got bored, and then they got on a plane. And then they drove some more. Then they got on a plane. Then they drove some more. Then they got on a plane. Then they drove some more. Back and forth, back and forth. Till finally they ended up in Las Vegas, which was the last landing. And they found that they realized at that time, by the way, they first realized the pilot was bloody drunk beyond belief. This guy was just ripped solid. Well, as they're pulling into Vegas, there's a dust storm. So they're told, a dust storm, that means, you know, it's dangerous landings, all this kind of thing. They were also told they were the last landing. That's right, they were the last landing allowed in Vegas before the dust storm hit. It was coming in, and before it hit, they allowed their plane in. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to land there. I mean, they landed somewhere. And they were also told that all the hotels were filled. Right, so Harry gets on the phone to Glenn Campbell, can't reach him. So he gets on the phone to Liza Minnelli, can reach her. She says, no problem, Harry, I will arrange something. So she arranges a hotel suite, and she arranges a table, you know, what do you call it, a ringside table, ringside table for them, for the six of them, for her show. So he says, well, as he said, they ate shit, showered, and shaved, and then ran down, and they said, now check this out. Okay, they met at their table. They met, or next to, I think the table next to, they met Tony Martin Jr. I knew Tony Martin for years and years. I knew Tony Martin Jr. only because I did a couple of shoots of him for Tiger Beat Monkey Spectacular, but I didn't know him very well. But Desi Jr. was there, and Dino was there. The Dino was Dean Martin's Jr. And they were listening. Get this. This was his point. The whole thing is they're listening to Liza Minnelli. Okay, so it's Tony Martin Jr., Desi Arnaz Jr., Dean Martin Jr. listening to Judy Garland Jr., Liza Minnelli. That was his. And by the way, Eric, who was he was the son of Otto Preminger and Gypsy Rose Lee. And what happened is later on, he was very whacked out. He was going through emotional crisis. His mother had died. This is Eric Preminger. So to cool him out, Harry suggested that they jump into the pool with their clothes on. This is in Vegas. And the story ends, they all jumped in the pool with their clothes on. End of story.